the noun becomes a field of sensation, making felt the ineffable more than of perception, the welling non-conscious activity of experience in the making.
It's just a feeling. It's like, how do you tell somebody how it feels to be in love? How are you going to tell anybody who has not been in love how it feels to be in love? You cannot do it to save your life. You can describe things, but you can't tell them. But you know it when it happens. That's what I mean by free.
I like the fact that field recordings put you in the reality. It's not pure artifact. All of a sudden, it's the materiality of the world.
What is interesting in this back and forth between this reality and the sounds, compositions, artificial ways of reproducing sounds and so on, is actually a very complex interaction with a substance of reality that comes from reality in those sound recordings. I'm interested in the substance of reality, in texture, in complexity, in richness, in virtual space, in the idea of space that we have from reality, in the idea of time that we get from reality. And all of those things are not necessarily representational.
When we recorded the fish, maybe we didn't record anything, maybe yes. But there was an interaction. And that's with the fish and me, and that's the most important thing.
What Blackman calls carrying the feeling is all about the movement of a subjectivity very much in flux. Feeling here, as in Whitehead, is not to be understood as an external response to an existing event. Feeling is what defines the quality of the event in the event. There is here no external subjectivity. The subject, as in Whitehead, is not the activator of the act, but what emerges in the act.
But when I hear traffic, the sound of traffic here on 6th Avenue, for instance, I don't have the feeling that anyone is talking. I have the feeling that sound is acting. And I love the activity of sound.
Juxtaposition, I think, is more interesting. I mean, just look at around the room which we're all sitting in. There will be elements which were never intended to go alongside each other, but in fact make extraordinarily interesting visual arrangements, or sounds from the kitchen with the radio on and a car passing by. For me, that's a much more interesting sound world than the one of people interestingly making dialogues.
Propose a shift to agencement as the concept best capable of carrying agency. Agencement, the directed intensity of a compositional movement that alters the field of experience.
This is the truth. This is allowing me to walk around with a crown on my head, or just like this power, to be motivated, to be okay. No matter what someone from the outside is telling you that you're lacking or you're living in some type of poverty.
I was hearing all of the insects and birds and animals that were sounding in the Houston, Texas environment, which was very dense. It was almost like a rainforest. I liked the cicadas very much, all different kinds of things that I heard.
What it does is it gets louder and quieter, and it gets higher and lower, and it gets longer and shorter. It does all those things which I'm completely satisfied with that. I don't need sound to talk to me.
The feeling, like Blackman's carrying feeling, is that which moves the event toward what Whitehead calls its satisfaction. It is the event's agency.
A friend of mine came over to see me, and I was confined to bed. I couldn't move. But as she left, she said, "Shall I put a record on?" And I said, "Please." And she put a record on and then left. The record was much too quiet, but I couldn't reach to turn it up. And it was raining outside, so it was a record of 18th century harp music, I remember. And so I lay there at first kind of frustrated by this situation. But then I started listening to the rain and listening to these odd notes of the harp that were just loud enough to be heard above the rain. And this was a great musical experience.
I think juxtaposition of material is what I'm about.
What noise source is referring to here is the material means of communication. And the reason for this is because the material means of communication always transform the signal in some way. So noise is transformative.
I suddenly thought of this idea of making music that didn't impose itself on your space in the same way, but created a sort of landscape that you could belong to, you could be part of. And this, I called it ambient music.
Someone told me once, recording is about distance between you, your microphone, and the thing you want to record, and you have to be aware of the gesture you make.
Roll up your sleeves and let's work on alternative and what we need to do, the daily gestures of transformation of the ways in which we live, which is the reason why the planet is in the condition that it is.
To me, it is terrible. And so all I'm trying to do all the time is just to open people up so they can feel themselves and let themselves be open to somebody else. That is all. That's it.
So I was fascinated with listening as far back as I can remember.
This is a Tamura was here. Tamura is the sound of this creek.
Always like curious to to like them empty spaces on the tracks, like the little sounds, like you will hear like a sound and you wonder if that's if that's somebody putting down a cup or a spliff, or if that was a door closing. I'm quite like curious to hear what that was, because that's the part that I really connect with.
Who is the I in the ecological field of experience in the making?
The I, who I am, my personal experiences transmitted the expression of sentiment. Whereas laying the guitar on the table, it was much more reflecting something about the world rather than a personal viewpoint.
Whitehead calls this emergent individual the subjective form of the event. The subjective form, the subject of the event, event's speciation, does not necessarily resemble a human subject.
Happens a lot with poetry. You write something that seems to be about a little small situation you're dealing with in your scene, but it reflects on this, greater picture of what's happening in the world.
Whenever you look at any of those artists, you find that they lived and drew from a very, very active, flourishing cultural scene. And they were only one of the elements in that scene. All these people who are called genius actually sat in the middle of something that I call scenius. Just as genius is the creative intelligence of an individual, scenius is the creative intelligence of a community.
So all this, it's not really my music, It's the both thing is myself.
Once you know about this, your way of listening to these sounds will change. And this is a natural process, and this is a normal process. Because we are obviously influenced by what we know, and what we know, especially when we're dealing with real, so-called real sounds, we are definitely influenced by what we know in the way we listen to things.
As John McMurray argued, the Cartesian idea of I think, therefore I am, is not the whole human being. We are not whole human beings when we're simply thinking. We're whole human beings when we're acting, and acting in a way that includes our thinking, our artistic forms, and our experience, when our action is coming out of our sense of inquiry in the world.
Calm and cool and really got the antenna working. You know when to push and you know when to not. Nobody can tell you though, you have to feel it.
This capacity to directly perceive experience informing, what I have called autistic perception, involves a continuous carrying, a moving with of experience in the making.
So if action research is intending to change the world, we have to ask, well, what are we changing it for? And so at the heart of action research is always a question about what is worthwhile. What are worthwhile purposes for us to pursue?
But most of us have overlooked the ways neurotypicality structures our original myths, starting from the idea that humans are distinctly above all other forms of life, all the way to the idea that certain forms of human life are more worthwhile than others.
So for him, efficiency of communication was the thing that was most important, and that was partly due to the economic imperatives informing his work.
Without spiritual help, music don't give effect. Music will be music, but some special effect making. Spiritual help need to the musician.
The bubbles I play, it sounds differently every time I play. And the feedback I play, it totally affected by the acoustics of the space. So in a way, my role is more like making an environment for them, for my balls to resonate.
If you listen to Beethoven or to Mozart, you see that they're always the same. But if you listen to traffic, you see it's always different.
I differentiate to hear and to listen. To hear is the physical means that enables perception. To listen is to give attention to what is perceived, both acoustically and psychologically. Hearing turns a certain range of vibrations into perceptible sounds. When listening, there is a constant interplay with the perception of the moment compared with remembered experience. Listening, or the interpretation of sound waves then, is subject to time delays. Sometimes what is heard is interpreted anywhere from milliseconds to many years later or never.
With this instrument in particular, my role as a musician is in a way limited. I really think that my instrument is kind of almost like a living organism, you know? And I am there to try to control, but it's not possible to control this instrument.
The level of awareness of soundscape brought about by deep listening can lead to the possibility of shaping the chaotic sounds of technology and of urban environments and machinery.
According to season, they change their tone. These things help me a lot. Another bird, this is a nightingale. This is crow. He's changing his tone. other is. So this is natural things, natural place. Lord's house, nobody's house.
Experience, which I prefer to all others, is the experience of silence. And the silence almost everywhere in the world now is traffic.
I sought to understand noise as a relation that does something. And with this, I sought to invoke the idea of affect, both as a kind of feeling and sensation, but also as a transformative, perhaps more abstract relation.
Practicing open places. Walls have a stuck feeling. Open place have a how much can fly ideas.
There's a paradox here, which is I am not interested in representation, in soundscapes in the sense of representing reality. I'm not doing recordings because I want to simulate or reenact or recompose or listen again to this reality. And the more I work with reality, so-called reality, the more I am convinced that this is futile.
Whitehead calls the process toward actualization concrescence, emphasizing the sense of a growing in the event. Subjective aim is key here as a lure for feeling. Feeling is the force in the event that lures experience into a tendency to form.
feeling something else. Like like, I'll tell you what freedom is to me. No fear. I mean, really, no fear. If I could have that half of my life, no fear. Lots of children have no fear. That's the closest way, that's the only way I can describe it. That's not all of it, but it is something to really feel.
Like, I've noticed.
Like a new way of seeing.
The rainforest, for me, has been a transformative force. Being exposed to this, to the richness of these environments, in particular in relation to sound, among other things, something that is peculiar, and very important in the rainforest is that it's an environment that is extremely rich. It has all this incredible complexity of sounds, and it's this 24-hour constant changes, and it is the variety of things is incredible. The range of things is incredible too, but you don't see the sources of all this complexity, all this sonic complexity. It's basically a naturally acousmatic environment, meaning a place where you have an amazing sonic display all the time, but you cannot see what are the sources of all these sounds. So it's an invisible world.
I like most of the time that you can't identify really the source, and also that maybe sometimes field recordings travel from one piece to another. They are a bit like characters.
I think we just wanted different sounds, and from that we just started recording a lot of things. you know, water, animals, things that we still can't identify what they are, because a lot of the times we'll just leave a recorder just running, you know, just somewhere, and we'll just take it back and see what we got.
That are in this post-human convergence, as I call it, the convergence of the fourth industrial revolution and the sixth extinction. Let's deal with this convergence by bringing in the critical tools of post-humanism, as well as the critical tools of post-anthropocentrism. We have those tools. We just need to activate them in an affirmative ethical mode to create alternatives. Transformation begins in the here and the now. And the question is not extinctions per se, the question is what we are capable of becoming in this particular convergence with the particular fractures, challenges, with the pain and the exhilaration of living through a massive mutation.
The bigger goal of field recording is being an active listener. So the future for me is that we keep listening.